Farmer sees the cleaning woman playing with his disabled son in the barn and freezes in shock. David Miller stopped at the barn entrance, feeling his chest tighten in a way he hadn't experienced in 3 years. There was the new cleaning woman, lying on the golden hay, while his son Timmy gently stepped on her belly, both laughing in a way he'd never seen the boy laugh before. The sound of that child's laughter struck him like lightning. Since Rebecca had passed, leaving them alone on this farm in rural Tennessee, little Timmy had barely smiled. His cerebral palsy already made communication difficult, limiting him to simple gestures and expressive looks. "Again, Aunt Sarah, again!" the boy shouted, balancing on the young woman who held his tiny hands carefully. David leaned against the rough wood of the doorway, watching unnoticed. Sarah Johnson had only been working at Oak Ridge Farm for 2 weeks. He'd hired her after the previous employee quit, claiming she couldn't handle Timmy's special needs. What David didn't tell anyone was that Sarah was the 18th person he'd hired in 3 years. All the others had left for similar reasons. "Now I'll teach you a new game," Sarah said, sitting up in the hay. "Let's pretend you're a little bird trying to fly." She held the boy's hands and helped him stand, moving his arms like wings. Timmy laughed again, a pure sound echoing through the wooden walls of the barn. David closed his eyes for a moment. The scene transported him 15 years back, to when his youngest sister, Jennifer, used to play with him in that very same barn. Before the accident, before everything changed, before she left the family, never to return. "Look, Aunt Sarah." Timmy managed 2 shaky steps before leaning on her again. "Well done, champ. You're getting stronger every day," Sarah replied, hugging him tenderly. It was then that she noticed David standing at the entrance. Her brown eyes widened, and she tried to stand quickly, embarrassed at being caught during work hours. "I'm sorry, Mr. Miller. I was just—" But Timmy clung to her, starting to whimper softly. It was something he never did with strangers. In fact, it was something he rarely did with anyone, including his own father. "Don't go, Aunt Sarah," the boy murmured, hiding his face in her shoulder. David felt something shift in his chest. For 3 years he'd built emotional walls around his heart, shielding himself from the pain of losing his wife and watching his son struggle alone with his limitations. But now, seeing Timmy cling to this woman with an affection he himself couldn't inspire, he felt those walls tremble. "No need to apologize," he said, finally stepping closer. "You can keep playing with him." Sarah looked at him in surprise. Over those 2 weeks, David had been a man of few words, always polite but distant. She'd noticed the deep sadness in his green eyes, the way he avoided staying in the same room as his son for too long. "Are you sure, sir? I can go back to the main house and finish cleaning." "The house can wait," David said, sitting on a nearby hay bale. "It's been a long time since I've seen Timmy this happy." For the next hour, he stayed and watched. Sarah turned simple activities into grand adventures. A walk through the barn became a jungle expedition. Moving his arms transformed into soaring through the sky, and Timmy responded to each game with an enthusiasm David thought was lost forever. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us newcomers a lot. Now continuing. As the sun began to set, painting the barn in golden hues, Sarah carried Timmy in her arms to the main house. The boy had fallen asleep in her embrace, something that usually only happened after much effort and patience. "Mrs. Margaret made dinner," said David, referring to the housekeeper who had cared for the property for over 20 years. "Thank you, Mr. David, but I usually eat in my room," replied Sarah, still holding Timmy. "Not tonight. You'll dine with us." It wasn't an invitation. It was almost an order, spoken kindly but firmly. Sarah nodded, puzzled by her employer's sudden change in behavior. At the kitchen table, David learned things about his employee that left him stunned. Sarah Johnson was 28 and came from Nashville. She had graduated with a degree in physical therapy from Vanderbilt University 6 years ago, but lost her professional license after being falsely accused of negligence by a patient. "It was a misunderstanding," she explained, avoiding details, "but it ruined my reputation. No one wanted to hire me in the field anymore." David sensed there was more to the story, but didn't press. What amazed him was seeing Timmy willingly eat food from her without resistance. Normally, the boy refused solid food, accepting only purees and liquids. Yet there he was, chewing small pieces of chicken that Sarah patiently cut for him. "How do you do that?" David asked, genuinely curious. "Do what?" "He's eating real food. I've been trying for months and he always refuses." Sarah smiled modestly. "I think it's just patience, and maybe he feels more at ease when there's no pressure." Margaret, a woman in her 60s with graying hair always tied in a tight bun, watched from the sink where she washed dishes. Her dark eyes held an expression David couldn't decipher. "Mrs. Margaret, won't you join us?" Sarah asked politely. "I don't usually eat with the employers," the housekeeper replied without turning around. David noticed the coldness in Margaret's voice. She had been like a second mother to him after he lost his parents young. She ran the farm with absolute dedication and had always been possessive of his attention, especially after Rebecca left. After dinner, once Timmy was asleep in his room, David found Margaret tidying the living room. "You don't like Sarah," he said, more a statement than a question. Margaret stopped dusting and turned to him. "It's not that I dislike her, Mr. David. I just find it odd for a college-educated woman to accept work as a cleaner. There must be something she's not telling us." "Everyone deserves a fresh start, Margaret." "Maybe, but you've gone through 17 employees in 3 years. They all left because they couldn't handle Timmy. Why would this one be different?" David had no answer, but something deep in his heart told him Sarah was indeed different. Over the following days, a new routine settled at the farm. Sarah continued her cleaning duties, but David allowed her to spend more time with Timmy. The boy had transformed. He smiled more, tried new words, and even showed interest in activities he'd once avoided. Then, on a rainy Thursday, David discovered something that would change everything. He had gone out to check the cattle in the north pasture when the downpour began. He ran back to the house but decided to stop by the barn to grab a tarp he'd forgotten there the week before. As he approached the entrance, he heard voices coming from inside. One was clearly Timmy's, but speaking more clearly than he ever had before. The other was Sarah's, but using terms that didn't seem typical for a cleaning lady. David moved quietly and peeked through a crack in the wood. Sarah was sitting on the floor with Timmy, but they weren't just playing. She was holding the boy's little legs, making specific, controlled movements while counting to 10. Then she helped him lean on an improvised structure made of hay bales. "Very good, Timmy. Now let's try taking 3 little steps to me," she said, positioning herself a short distance away. "I can't, Aunt Sarah." "Of course you can. Remember what we talked about the little bird? It isn't born knowing how to fly. First it practices flapping its wings, then it tries short flights until it can fly high." Timmy nodded and, with a concentration David had never seen before, took 1 step. Then another, and 1 more. 3 steps without support. David's heart nearly stopped. His son, who doctors said might never walk without permanent assistance, had just taken 3 steps on his own. "I did it! I did it, Aunt Sarah!" "Yes, you did, champ. Now let's do 1 more exercise to strengthen your legs." David kept watching for another 20 minutes. Sarah was conducting a full physical therapy session disguised as play. She knew exactly which muscles to work, which movements to make, how to encourage Timmy without frustrating him. When he finally stepped away from the barn, David was a mix of relief, gratitude, and anger. Relief at seeing his son might have a better future than he'd imagined. Gratitude that Sarah was helping Timmy in a way none of the previous therapists had managed. And anger that she had lied about her background and was working with his son without his permission. That night, after Timmy went to sleep, David confronted Sarah in the living room. "We need to talk." Sarah was folding clean laundry. When she heard the seriousness in David's voice, her hands froze over one of Timmy's little shirts. "Is something wrong, Mr. Miller?" "You lied to me." The words were spoken softly, but they carried a weight that made Sarah sink heavily onto the couch. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You're a physical therapist, licensed, trained, and you've been doing therapy sessions with my son without telling me." Sarah lowered her head. Her hands trembled slightly. "How did you find out?" "I saw you in the barn today. I saw Timmy take 3 steps on his own." "He took 3 steps." Sarah's eyes lit up for a moment before fear returned. "Mr. Miller, I can explain." "Then explain, and I want the whole truth." Sarah took a deep breath before beginning. "It's true that I'm a licensed physical therapist. I worked for 4 years at a clinic specializing in pediatric cerebral palsy in Nashville. I loved my work, until I met Dr. Richard Bennett." She paused as if the next words were hard to say. "He was the clinic director. Married, older, powerful. He started harassing me, saying he could fast-track my career if I was friendlier with him. When I refused, he began retaliating." David sat in the armchair across from the couch, listening intently. "One of my patients was the daughter of an influential family. The girl was making good progress, but during one session she fell and hurt her arm. It was an accident. These things happen. But Dr. Bennett convinced the parents it was my negligence. He said I was distracted, that I wasn't competent enough to handle complex cases. And what happened? I lost my license temporarily. The legal process has been dragging on for 2 years, but in the meantime I can't work as a physical therapist. Dr. Richard made sure my name was tarnished in the medical community. No one will hire me." David felt anger rising inside him. He knew all too well the destructive power of influential people when they decided to ruin someone. "Why didn't you tell me this from the start?" "Because I'm afraid." Sarah looked up to meet his eyes. "I'm afraid people will think I really am incompetent. I'm afraid of being rejected again. And when I saw Timmy..." She paused, wiping a tear that rolled down her cheek. "When I saw his condition, I couldn't just stand by. I know I can help him. I know he has the potential to improve far more than the doctors believe. But I also knew that if you found out about my past, you'd send me away immediately." David was silent for a long moment. The fury he'd felt in the barn had been replaced by something more complex. "You're right about one thing," he finally said. "If I'd known your story from the beginning, I probably wouldn't have hired you." Sarah nodded sadly. "But now that I do know," David continued, "I want you to keep helping my son. Officially." "What?" "I want to hire you as Timmy's private physical therapist. I don't care that your license is suspended. Here on the farm, you can work however you want." Sarah stared at him in disbelief. "Mr. Miller, you don't understand. If anyone finds out, you could face legal trouble and your reputation could be completely ruined," he finished. "I understand the risks, but I also understand that my son took 3 steps today. 3 steps the doctors said he might never take." David stood and began pacing the room. "Timmy is happy for the first time in 3 years. He's making progress. He's becoming a normal kid that's worth any risk." "But, Mr. Miller..." "There's no more discussion about this. Tomorrow, we'll set up a proper space for his sessions. You'll teach me everything about Timmy's condition, and we'll work together to give him the best life possible." Sarah began to cry, this time from relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me back my son." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the days that followed, the farm transformed. David had one of the smaller barns cleaned and organized into a proper physical therapy room. He bought basic equipment recommended by Sarah and even installed mirrors on the walls so Timmy could observe his movements. The change in Timmy was remarkable. With regular sessions and the right techniques, he began walking longer distances. His speech became clearer, and his motor coordination improved drastically. But not everything was harmonious on the farm. Margaret watched these changes with growing unease. She had cared for Timmy since he was born, through Rebecca's difficult pregnancy and the 3 years since she'd passed. Seeing another woman take such an important place in the boy's life stirred bitter jealousy in her. "This won't end well," she muttered to herself while preparing lunch. Some mysterious woman showing up out of nowhere, filling his head with false hope. It was on a Saturday afternoon that Margaret decided to act. David had gone to town to handle bank business, and Sarah was in the new therapy room with Timmy. Margaret took the opportunity to search Claudia's room, looking for anything she could use against her. At the bottom of a drawer, she found a folder with documents, letters from former patients praising Claudia's work, certificates from specialized courses, and among everything, an official document suspending her professional license. Margaret read every word carefully. There was the name of the doctor responsible for the accusation, Dr. Richard Bennett, and there was also the address of the clinic where Claudia had worked. Without hesitation, Margaret wrote down the phone number and decided to make a call. Riverside Clinic, good morning. Good morning, I'd like to speak about a former employee of yours, Sarah Johnson. One moment, please. A few minutes later, a man's voice answered. Dr. Richard Bennett, how can I help you? Doctor, my name is Margaret. I work at a farm in the countryside where a young woman named Sarah Johnson was hired. I'd like to know about her professional reputation. There was a pause on the other end of the line. May I ask why you're interested in this information? She's working with a child who has cerebral palsy. We want to make sure she's trustworthy. I see. Well, Mrs. Margaret, I'm afraid I cannot recommend Miss Johnson's services. She was dismissed from our clinic for serious negligence. A child was injured under her care due to her lack of attention and competence. Margaret smiled maliciously. Serious negligence? What kind of negligence? I can't go into specific details, but I can say she demonstrated complete irresponsibility in handling vulnerable patients. It would be highly irresponsible to allow her to work with special needs children again. I understand. Thank you very much, Doctor. You're welcome. And ma'am, if I may offer advice, keep that woman away from any children. She's dangerous. Margaret hung up the phone, feeling victorious. She finally had the ammunition she needed to rid the farm of that intruder. But what Margaret didn't know was that David had come back early from town and had overheard the entire conversation from the hallway. That night, after Claudia put Timmy to bed and went to her room, David confronted Margaret in the kitchen. You called Claudia's old clinic today, it wasn't a question. Margaret stopped washing the dishes and turned slowly. I heard your conversation, David continued. Every word of it. Mr. David, I was only trying to protect you and Timmy. That woman, David interrupted with a firmness in his voice that Margaret rarely heard, brought joy back to my son. And you're trying to destroy that out of pure jealousy. It's not jealousy, it's genuine concern. The doctor said she's dangerous, that the doctor is the same man who ruined her career because she rejected his advances. Claudia told me the whole story. Margaret fell silent, absorbing this information. Margaret? David stepped closer to her. You've been like a mother to me since I lost my parents. You took care of me, the farm, Timmy. I love you like family, but I won't let you harm the only person who's been able to help my son in the last 3 years. I just don't want you to get hurt, Margaret murmured, tears in her eyes. I know, but Claudia won't hurt us. She's been the one hurting for 2 years because of lies, and we're going to help her, not make it worse. David placed a hand on the housekeeper's shoulder. I'm only asking one thing, give her a chance. Get to know her for real. See what she's doing for Timmy, and if after that you still think she's a threat, we'll talk again. Margaret nodded reluctantly. All right, Mr. David. But if I find out anything suspicious, if you find out anything truly suspicious, you tell me right away. Deal? Deal. In the following days, Margaret watched Sarah with extra care, but this time, instead of looking for flaws, she paid attention to the details of the physical therapist's work. She saw how Sarah spent hours studying books about cerebral palsy after Timmy fell asleep, how she carefully noted each of the boys' progress in a notebook, how she cried with joy whenever he managed to perform a new movement. She also noticed how Sarah treated everyone on the farm with respect and kindness, even when Margaret was cold toward her, how she always offered to help with household chores, even after a full day of physical work with Timmy. And most importantly, she saw how Timmy had flourished under her care. The boy who once spent whole days quiet and sad now woke up excited, asking if he could play with Aunt Sarah. It was on a Tuesday morning that Margaret finally decided to take the first step toward reconciliation. Sarah was in the kitchen preparing Timmy's morning snack when Margaret approached. "Can I help with that?" Sarah looked surprised. It was the first time in 3 weeks Margaret had offered to help her with anything. "Of course, Mrs. Margaret. I was just cutting the fruit into smaller pieces to make it easier for him to chew." "I know how Timmy likes his fruit," Margaret said, picking up a knife. "I've taken care of him since he was born." They worked side by side in silence for a few minutes. Finally, Margaret gathered the courage to speak. "Sarah, I need to apologize to you." "Apologize? For what?" "For being so cold toward you, for trying to dig into your past to use against you. David told me about the call I made." Sarah stopped cutting an apple and looked at the housekeeper. "Mrs. Margaret, I understand your concern. If I had cared for a child for years and suddenly a stranger showed up, that's no excuse," Margaret interrupted. "I was being petty and jealous, and I nearly ruined the best thing that's happened to Timmy in years." "You didn't have to like me right away. Trust takes time." "No, dear. I should have given you a chance from the beginning, and I'm sorry for that." Sarah smiled and placed a hand on the older woman's arm. "It's all right, Mrs. Margaret. What matters is that now we can work together for Timmy's sake." "That's what I want," Margaret said sincerely. "And I want you to know that if you need anything, any help proving your innocence in that clinic business, you can count on me." "Thank you. That means a lot to me." From that day on, the dynamic on the farm changed completely. Margaret became Sarah's ally, helping with physical therapy sessions and even suggesting activities that could benefit Timmy. David watched these changes with growing satisfaction. For the first time in 3 years, his home felt like a real home again. Then, on a rainy Thursday in October, everything changed once more. David was in the therapy room helping Sarah with a session when they heard the sound of a car arriving at the farm. Through the window, they saw a taxi stop in front of the main house. A woman in a wheelchair stepped out. David paled. "Daddy, who's that lady?" Timmy asked, peering out the window. It's your Aunt Jennifer," David answered, his voice hoarse. Sarah immediately sensed the tension filling the room. "Your sister?" she asked quietly. David nodded, unable to take his eyes off the woman approaching the house. "We haven't spoken in 15 years. Jennifer Miller was 42, with short brown hair and a face that bore a clear resemblance to David's. She maneuvered the wheelchair skillfully, rolling up the ramp leading to the porch. Margaret appeared at the front door, as surprised as everyone else. "Jennifer, my God, Jennifer!" "Hi, Margaret," said Jennifer, forcing a smile. "Do you still remember me?" "As if I could forget. Child, where have you been all these years?" David finally came out of the physical therapy room, carrying Timmy in his arms. Sarah followed them, staying discreetly behind. Brother and sister stared at each other in silence for a long moment. 15 years of resentment and longing hung between them like a heavy cloud. "David," Jennifer finally said. "Jennifer, I got your letter." "What letter?" Jennifer opened her purse and pulled out a yellowed envelope. "This one. It arrived at my home in Chicago last week." David took the envelope, confused. The handwriting was his, but he didn't remember writing any letter. "I didn't write this." "Yes, you did," said Margaret, stepping out from behind the door where she'd been hiding. "I wrote it in your name, because it was time for the two of you to talk." "Margaret!" David turned to her, disbelieving. "Mr. David, with all due respect, this grudge has gone on long enough. And now, with Timmy, I thought Jennifer had the right to meet her nephew." Jennifer looked at the child in David's arms. Timmy watched her curiously, unafraid. "Is this Timmy?" "Yes," David replied, his voice a mix of pride and tension. "Hi, Auntie," said Timmy, waving shyly. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. "Hi, sweetheart. You're even more beautiful than I imagined." "Why are you in a chair?" the boy asked with the frankness typical of children. "Because my legs don't work right, like yours." "But mine are getting better. Aunt Sarah is teaching me to walk better. Want to see?" Timmy squirmed in David's arms, signaling he wanted down. David set him on the floor, and the boy walked slowly to Jennifer, taking 4 steady steps before leaning on the wheelchair. "Wow," You walk so well, Jennifer said, impressed. Aunt Sarah says one day I'll run like the other boys. Jennifer looked at Sarah, who had remained silent, watching the scene. You must be the physical therapist Margaret wrote about in the letter. I'm Sarah Johnson. Nice to meet you. The pleasure's mine. From what I read, you've been working miracles with my nephew. David was still processing the situation. Margaret, how did you get Jennifer's address? I never lost touch with her, the housekeeper admitted. We've been writing for years. I thought it was wrong for you two to be apart because of what happened in the past. You knew where she was all this time? Yes, and she always knew how you were doing. She knew when you got married, when Timmy was born, when Rebecca passed. She just didn't come because she thought you wouldn't want to see her. David sank heavily into a chair on the porch. The revelation that Margaret had secretly been in contact with Jennifer for years left him shaken. Why didn't you tell me? Because you're as stubborn as your father, Margaret replied, and because you were both too proud to make the first move. Jennifer maneuvered her chair closer to her brother. David, I know you must still be hurt by how I left, but when I got Margaret's letter about Timmy, about the struggles you were facing, I couldn't stay away. Why did you leave, Jennifer? David asked, finally voicing the question that had haunted him for 15 years. Why didn't you trust me to help you? Jennifer took a deep breath before answering. Because I was pregnant, David. I was 17, pregnant by a married man from the city, and terrified of disappointing you. You could never disappoint me. Oh, David. You were 25, had just inherited the farm after Dad and Mom passed, trying to keep everything running by yourself. I thought I'd just be another problem in your life. You were my sister, my responsibility. David stood up, agitated. I would have taken care of you, the baby, everything. I know that now. But back then, I was terrified and couldn't think straight. Rebecca sensed the conversation needed privacy. Timmy, how about we go make a special snack for your aunt, she suggested. Okay, I'll show her how I can cut bananas all by myself. Rebecca led the boy inside, followed by Margaret, leaving the siblings alone on the porch. What happened to the baby? David asked softly. I lost him at 6 months, Jennifer replied, sadness still clear in her voice 15 years later. It was soon after I left here. I was staying with a cousin in Nashville, working at a factory to support myself. One day, I felt terrible pain, and by the time I got to the hospital, it was too late. David stepped closer and hesitantly placed a hand on his sister's shoulder. Jennifer, I'm so sorry. After that, I fell into a deep depression, started drinking, making bad choices. One night, I drove drunk and crashed into a tree. That's how I became paraplegic, yes. Spinal injury, L3 and below. Spent 2 years in the hospital and rehab. David sat on the edge of the porch, near his sister's chair. Why didn't you come to me even after the accident? Pride, shame. I thought you'd blame me for all the bad choices I made. And as the years passed, it got harder to turn back. I looked for you, Jennifer, for years. Hired private investigators, put ads in papers, did everything to find you. I changed my name, she admitted. After the accident, when I started over, I registered as Jennifer Smith. Didn't want anyone from my past to find me. David laughed bitterly. Smith, same as Rebecca's last name. Pure coincidence. I picked it because it was common, easy to blend in. They sat in silence for a few minutes, watching the cows graze in the distant field. Jennifer, I need you to know something, David finally said. When you left home, it was the worst day of my life up to that point. But not because I was mad at you. It was because I thought I'd failed as your big brother. David, all these years I blame myself for not creating an environment where you felt safe to tell me about the pregnancy. Blamed myself for being so serious, so focused on the farm, that you thought I wouldn't have time for your problems. Jennifer turned her chair to face him. None of that was your fault. I was young and scared. You were always a wonderful brother. Then why didn't you come back, even after growing up, after overcoming your struggles? Because the longer I stayed away, the more I convinced myself you'd moved on without me. Margaret told me about your life, how the farm thrived, your marriage to Rebecca. I thought my return would just bring back bad memories. David took his sister's hand. Jennifer, not a single day passed when I didn't think of you. Not one. And when Timmy was born with cerebral palsy, I wish so much you were here. Why? Because you were always the strongest person I knew. Even as a teenager, you faced every challenge head-on. I thought if anyone could teach me how to handle Timmy's limitations, it'd be you. Jennifer began to cry. David, I'm not strong. I spent 15 years running from my own problems. You're here now. After 15 years, you found the courage to come back. If that isn't strength, I don't know what is. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like the video and especially to subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. From inside the house came the sound of Timmy's laughter, mixed with Sarah's patient voice, explaining how to hold the knife to cut the banana. It was a sound that filled David's heart in a way he hadn't experienced in years. She's special, isn't she? Jennifer remarked, also listening to the laughter. Sarah, she's extraordinary. She transformed Timmy's life in just a few weeks. And mine too, if I'm being honest. Jennifer smiled. Margaret mentioned in her letter that you two were getting close. It's complicated, David sighed. She works for me, and she has a difficult past. I don't want to put her in an uncomfortable position. David, can I give you some advice? Of course. We both lost too many years because we were afraid to speak our feelings. You, about me leaving. Me, about being afraid to come back. Don't make the same mistake with her. Before David could reply, Timmy appeared at the door carrying a tray with carefully arranged fruit pieces. Look, Aunt Jennifer, I made a special snack for you. How lovely, sweetheart. Did you do it all by yourself? Aunt Sarah helped me hold the knife, but I cut everything just right. Timmy approached the wheelchair and offered the tray to Jennifer. When she leaned in to take a piece of apple, the boy hugged her. I really like you, Aunt Jennifer. I really like you too, Timmy. Are you going to stay here with us? Jennifer glanced at David, silently asking, If your daddy says yes, I'd love to stay for a few days. Daddy? Can Aunt Jennifer stay? Of course she can, David replied. This is her home too. That afternoon, while Jennifer rested from her tiring journey, David had an honest conversation with Sarah in the barn where it all began. Thank you, he said. For what? For being so kind to my sister. I know the situation was strange and unexpected. She seems like a wonderful person, and it's obvious you two love each other deeply, despite the years apart. David stepped closer to Sarah, who was organizing the physical therapy equipment. Sarah, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Have you ever thought about trying to get your license back? Officially, I mean? Sarah stopped what she was doing. Every day. But I don't have the money for a good lawyer, and the process would be long and expensive. Dr. Richard has influence and resources I'll never have. What if you had help? What kind of help? David took a deep breath before continuing. Sarah, you've changed our lives, mine and Timmy's. In just a few weeks, you've done more for him than all the specialists we saw in 3 years. I want to repay that. Mr. Miller, you're already paying me a fair salary, and I'm not talking about salary. I'm talking about hiring the best lawyers to clear your name, fighting so you can get your license back and work officially again. Sarah looked at him in surprise. That would cost a fortune. I can afford it, and I want to. But why? Why invest so much in someone you've known for such a short time? David moved even closer. Because I believe in you. Because I see how much you care for Timmy. Because I know you're an exceptional therapist who was wronged. He paused, gathering courage to say what he truly felt. And because you've become important to me. Very important. Sarah's heart raced. Mr. Miller. David. Just David. David, I don't want you to feel obligated to help me out of gratitude or... It's not gratitude, he interrupted softly. It's much more than that. They looked at each other in silence for a moment, the air between them heavy with tension and unspoken possibilities. I feel something special for you too, admitted Sarah finally. But I'm afraid. Afraid of what? afraid of ruining everything, afraid that if things don't work out between us, I'll lose not just you, but Timmy too, and I couldn't bear that. David took her hands in his. Sarah, I can't promise everything will be perfect between us. Relationships are complicated, and I've been out of practice for 3 years. But I can promise that no matter what happens, you'll always have a place in Timmy's life, and in mine. Are you sure? Absolutely. Sarah smiled, feeling a mix of relief and hope she hadn't experienced in years. Then yes, I accept your help to get my license back, and I also accept seeing where this goes between us. David smiled and leaned in to kiss her, but was interrupted by Timmy's voice shouting from outside the barn. Dad, Aunt Sarah, come see. Aunt Jennifer is teaching wheelchair tricks. They laughed and walked out of the barn hand in hand, finding Jennifer spinning in her wheelchair while Timmy clapped excitedly. Can I try? The boy asked. You can, but let's do it in slow motion first, Jennifer replied, helping him onto her lap. David and Sarah watched the scene, hands still entwined, feeling like their lives were finally falling into place. The following days were some of the happiest the farm had seen in years. Jennifer adapted quickly to the household routine, helping with Timmy and sharing stories of her new life in Chicago, where she worked as an accessibility consultant for businesses. During that time, David contacted a law firm specializing in medical misconduct cases. The lawyers reviewed Sarah's case and were optimistic about her chances of reinstating her license. The case against you has several inconsistencies, explained Dr. Anthony Matthews, the lead attorney, during a video conference. And if we can prove harassment and persecution by Dr. Bennett, we may not only clear your name, but also sue him for emotional damages. How long would it take? Sarah asked. With proper documentation and witnesses, 6 to 8 months. And the real chances of success? Based on what I've seen so far, I'd say we have a 70% chance of a full victory and a 90% chance of at least getting your license back. After the meeting, Sarah felt more hopeful than she had in years, but one worry still gnawed at her. David, what if something comes up during the process that puts Timmy at risk? What if someone questions me working with him without a valid license? I've thought about that, David replied. I spoke with the lawyers, and they suggested that during the process, you officially work only as a personal caregiver, not as a physical therapist. The therapy sessions would be supervised by a licensed professional they can recommend. Wouldn't that be too expensive? Sarah, money isn't an issue. What matters is protecting you and Timmy. And where would this supervision happen? Right here. The professional would come a few times a week, observe your work, and sign the necessary reports. In practice, you'd keep doing exactly what you're already doing. The solution seemed perfect, until an unexpected visitor arrived, changing everything once again. It was a Monday morning when a black car pulled up at the farm's entrance. 2 men in dark suits and an elegantly dressed woman stepped out. David was on the porch drinking coffee when he saw them approach. Mr. David Miller? Asked one of the men. That's me. How can I help you? My name is Dr. Richard Bennett. This is my wife, Victoria, and our attorney, Dr. Frederick Cooper. David felt his blood run cold. This was the man who had destroyed Sarah Johnson's career. What do you want here? We'd like to talk about Sarah Johnson, replied Dr. Bennett with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah, who had been in the therapy room with Timmy, heard voices on the porch and went to investigate. When she saw Dr. Bennett, her face paled and she instinctively took a step back. Sarah, he said with false warmth. What a surprise to find you here. What do you want? She asked, her voice trembling. We'd like to make a proposal, the attorney interjected, one that would benefit everyone involved. David moved protectively between Sarah and the visitors. What kind of proposal? We know Miss Johnson is working with a special needs child without a valid professional license, said Dr. Bennett. That's a serious violation of professional regulations. Sarah works here as a personal caregiver, not as a therapist, David replied, trying to stay calm. Oh, Mr. Miller. Dr. Bennett's wife spoke for the first time. Let's not be naive. We all know she's doing far more than just watching the child. Timmy appeared at the door, curious about the voices. Daddy, Who are these people? Go back inside, son, David said gently but firmly. And this must be the patient, Dr. Bennett remarked, studying Timmy with clinical interest. Cerebral palsy, correct? That's none of your business, David snapped. Actually, it is, Dr. Bennett countered. As a doctor, I have a duty to protect vulnerable patients from unqualified practitioners. Unqualified? David took an angry step forward. This woman has done more for my son in 1 month than all the other specialists in 3 years. Mr. Miller, the attorney intervened, we're here to prevent legal trouble for everyone. Our offer is simple. Miss Johnson permanently surrenders her right to practice therapy, drops any lawsuits against my client, and we agree not to report the irregularities happening here. Sarah finally found her voice. And if I refuse? If you refuse, Dr. Bennett said, we'll have no choice but to file a formal complaint. Illegal practice, child endangerment, negligence. Mr. Miller here could even be charged as an accomplice. Are you threatening me? David asked, disbelieving. We're offering a civilized solution, Dr. Bennett's wife replied. My husband is a respected professional with decades of experience. We won't let a troublesome former employee tarnish his reputation. Troublesome employee? David could barely contain his anger. Your troublesome employee refused your husband's advances, and that's why her life was ruined. Be careful with baseless accusations, Mr. Miller, the attorney warned. Slander is also a crime. Enough, Sarah shouted, startling everyone. Enough of this harassment. She turned to Dr. Bennett with a determination she hadn't shown in years. You destroyed my career because you couldn't take no for an answer. You lied to that child's parents, fabricated evidence, bribed colleagues, and now you come here to intimidate me again. Sarah, you're getting emotional, Dr. Bennett said in the same patronizing tone he'd used 2 years before. I know you've had financial struggles and are desperate for work, but that doesn't justify... Justify what? She yelled. Justify me wanting to help a child? Isn't it justified for me to use my knowledge to improve someone's life? It isn't justified for you to put a child at risk with your unsupervised techniques, he shot back. Risk? Sarah was trembling with anger. You want to know what risk is? Risk is leaving a child without proper therapy, because doctors like you would rather protect your egos than help patients. David had never seen Sarah so upset. He stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to calm her. Sarah, you don't have to justify yourself to them. Yes, I do, David. She turned to him with tears in her eyes. I do, because this man destroyed my life once, and I won't let him do it again. She turned to Dr. Richard. You want to know the truth about what happened at the clinic? The truth you hid from everyone. Sarah, be careful what you say, her lawyer warned. Sophie Jenkins was 7 years old and had spastic cerebral palsy, Sarah continued, ignoring him. She'd been under my care for 6 months and was progressing exceptionally well, so much so that her parents were considering reducing her sessions. Dr. Richard tried to interrupt, but she pressed on. You were losing money because she was improving, and you were furious because I'd refused to have dinner with you for the 4th time that month. So you decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. That's a lie, he protested. A lie? Sarah laughed bitterly. You altered Sophie's medical records, changed the notes about her progress, and in the session where she got hurt, you sabotaged the equipment. The silence that followed was deafening. Prove it, Dr. Richard said, though his voice had lost its earlier confidence. I can prove it, a voice spoke up behind them. Everyone turned. Jennifer had quietly wheeled closer in her chair. Who are you? The lawyer asked. Jennifer Smith, David's sister. Smith? Dr. Richard studied her closely. Are you related to Sarah? Not by blood, but by choice, Jennifer replied, moving to stand beside Sarah. And I can prove everything she just said. That's impossible, he muttered. Impossible? Doctor, did you forget that Sophie Jenkins was my patient before she was Sarah's? Dr. Richard paled. Sophie was treated at Hope Clinic in Chicago for 2 years before moving to Nashville and going to your clinic. I was her physical therapist. Jennifer pulled a folder from the bag on her chair. Here are all of Sophie's original treatment records, reports that show exactly the progress she'd made, and the real limitations of her condition. She opened the folder and displayed the documents. When Sophie's parents contacted me about discrepancies in your clinic's reports, I started investigating, and I found out you'd falsified details about her condition. That proves nothing, Dr. Richard stammered. No, Jennifer smiled. Then maybe this will. She pulled another document from the folder. This is a letter from Sophie Jenkins, now 9 years old. A letter she wrote to Sarah last month, reaching out to me through Hope Clinic. Jennifer began to read. Dear Aunt Sarah, Mom told me you're having trouble because of me. I want you to know it wasn't your fault that I fell that day. I saw the doctor uncle tampering with the machine before our session, but I didn't understand what he was doing. Now that I'm older, Mom explained he did it on purpose to hurt you. I want to help prove you're a good physical therapist. You helped me so much and I've never forgotten. Love, Sophie. Dr. Richard's lawyer frowned. That letter has no legal weight. It's a child's testimony. You're right, Jennifer agreed. But this does. She pulled a small recorder from her purse. This is a recording of a conversation between Sophie and her parents from last month, where she describes in detail what she saw Dr. Richard do with the equipment that day. You can't use that, protested Dr. Richard, completely losing his composure. Actually, we can, said a male voice behind them. Everyone turned again. Dr. Anthony Matthews, Sarah's lawyer, was approaching, accompanied by another man in a suit. Dr. Matthews? David seemed surprised. How did you know? Miss Jennifer called me last night saying she had obtained crucial evidence. I came here today to collect it officially. He turned to Dr. Richard. Dr. Bennett, this is Detective Charles Ferguson. He'd like to ask you some questions about your practices at Riverside Clinic. Dr. Richard looked around like a cornered animal. His wife and his lawyer appeared equally lost. You can't prove anything, he said, but his voice came out weak and unconvincing. Actually, we can, replied the detective. Besides the evidence presented by Miss Jennifer, we have 3 former employees from your clinic who are willing to testify about your inappropriate behavior with staff and irregularities in medical reports. And we also have this, added Dr. Matthews, holding up an envelope. A financial investigation revealing you received undeclared commissions for unnecessarily prolonging patient treatments. Dr. Richard's wife stepped away from him, visibly shocked. Richard, what is this? Victoria, I can explain. There's no explanation for what you've done, she said with disgust. For what you did to those women, to those children. She turned to Sarah. I'm so sorry, I didn't know. If I had... Thank you, Sarah replied, still processing everything unfolding before her. The detective stepped closer to Dr. Richard. Dr. Bennett, you'll need to come with us for questioning. I have the right to a lawyer, he muttered. Of course, you can contact your attorney from the station. As Dr. Richard was led away, his wife approached Sarah again. Is there any way I can make up for the harm my husband caused? You don't need to hold yourself responsible, Sarah said gently. Yes, I do. I lived with him for 15 years and never suspected. How many other women went through what you did? How many careers did he ruin? Dr. Matthews intervened. Mrs. Bennett, if you have any relevant information, it could greatly help the case. I do. I have files at home, conversations I overheard, strange situations I ignored. I'll hand everything over to the authorities. After all the visitors had left, the farm fell silent. David, Sarah, Jennifer, and Margaret sat on the porch, still processing everything that had happened. Jennifer, Sarah finally said, how did you gather all this evidence? When Margaret told me your story in her letter, something bothered me. The name Dr. Richard Bennett sounded familiar. Then I remembered Sophie Jenkins had been my patient years ago. I reached out to her family and found out they'd always doubted the official version of events. But why didn't you say anything sooner? Because I wanted absolute certainty before raising hopes. I spent the last 2 weeks investigating, collecting testimonies, speaking with former clinic employees. Only yesterday did I have enough evidence to ensure Dr. Richard couldn't wriggle out of it this time. David took Jennifer's hand. Thank you. Thank you for protecting our family. Our family, Jennifer repeated, smiling. I like the sound of that. Sarah was crying, but they were tears of relief. 2 years, she murmured. 2 years believing I was incompetent, that I had hurt a child through negligence. Now you know the truth, said Margaret, sitting beside her. And the whole world will know too. What happens now? Asked David. Now, replied Dr. Matthews, who had returned to finalize some details. Sarah will have her license restored within weeks, and she'll likely receive substantial compensation for moral and financial damages. And Dr. Richard? He'll face multiple charges: falsifying medical records, sexual harassment, financial fraud. He won't get off easy. That night, after Timmy fell asleep, David and Sarah walked to the barn where it had all begun. How do you feel? He asked. Free, she answered without hesitation. For the first time in 2 years, I truly feel free. And what do you want to do now? With your license restored, you can work at any clinic, open your own practice. Sarah turned to him. David, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you still want me to stay here, even now that you don't feel obligated to protect me anymore? David took her hands. Sarah, I never felt obligated to protect you. I wanted to protect you because I love you. You love me? I do. Madly. I love your dedication to Timmy. I love your strength. I love how you brought joy back to this house. I love you too, she said, smiling through tears. And I love Timmy as if he were my own son. Then stay and let's build a real family. You, me, Timmy, Jennifer when she wants to visit. What if I want more than just visits from Jennifer? Interrupted a voice behind them. Jennifer had approached quietly. What do you mean? Asked David. I've been thinking. Chicago is too far. And after all these years alone, I've realized family is the most important thing in the world. Would there be room on the farm for a full-time sister? David smiled. Jennifer, this has always been your home, and it always will be. But now it would be different, she said. I'd actually help. I could assist Sarah with work, take care of Timmy, contribute financially. I've already talked to my company. I can work remotely. Are you sure? Asked Sarah. We don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel at home. 3 months later, Oak Ridge Farm had completely transformed. The stable, converted into a therapy room, had become a small rural rehabilitation center where Sarah, now with her license restored, treated not only Timmy but also other children from the area. Jennifer had moved to the farm permanently, occupying her old childhood bedroom, now adapted for her needs. She managed the administrative side of the rehab center and had become a second mother to Timmy. Margaret, initially resistant to so many changes, quickly fell in love with the constant flow of children and families visiting the farm. She had become the official grandma to all the little patients. Timmy's progress was remarkable. At 5 years old, he could walk considerable distances without support. His speech was clear and expressive, and his motor skills improved every day. It was on a sunny Saturday afternoon that David made the decision he'd been considering for weeks. He found Sarah in the barn preparing materials for the following week. Can I interrupt? Always, she replied, smiling. David approached, visibly nervous. Sarah, there's something I've wanted to ask you for a while. What is it? Do you remember the first day we met, when I found you here playing with Timmy? Like it was yesterday. That day, seeing you two laugh together, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. David took her hands. You gave me back my son. You gave me back my family. You gave me back the ability to love. And now, he knelt and pulled a small box from his pocket. Now I want you to officially be part of our family. Forever. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Sarah Johnson, will you marry me? David, Mommy Sarah, say yes, shouted Timmy, appearing at the barn entrance with Jennifer and Margaret. Everyone laughed at the unexpected interruption. Were you listening? Asked David, still on one knee. Timmy insisted on coming to see if you'd have the courage to propose, Jennifer replied, smiling. Well, Margaret prodded, are you going to answer the man or not? Sarah looked around at the expectant faces of the people who had become her family. Then she looked at David, still kneeling before her with the ring in his hand. Yes, she said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes, I will. David stood and kissed her as Timmy cheered excitedly. Jennifer and Margaret hugged, also moved to tears. "Now do I get a real mommy?" Timmy asked. "You already have a real mommy," Sarah answered, kneeling to his level, "since the very first day we met." "And can I be the best man at the wedding?" the boy asked. "You'll be much more than the best man," David said. "You'll walk your mum down the aisle. But she won't leave after, will she?" "Never," David and Sarah promised in unison. The wedding took place 3 months later, an intimate ceremony at the farm itself. The altar was set up in the barn where it all began, decorated with wildflowers and surrounded by festooned hay bales. Timmy, dapper in his little suit, walked down the makeshift aisle all on his own, leading Sarah to David. Every step he took brought tears to the guests' eyes. Jennifer was the maid of honor, and Margaret officiated the ceremony, a role she had insisted on taking. "Today," Margaret said during the service, "we're not just celebrating the union of David and Sarah. We're celebrating the healing of a broken family and the creation of a new one, built on love, resilience, and second chances." Dr. Matthews attended as a guest, bringing good news. Dr. Richard had been sentenced to 5 years in prison and a hefty fine, part of which would go to Sarah as compensation. Sophie Jenkins and her family were also there, finally reunited with the physical therapist they so admired. "Aunt Sarah," Sophie said at the reception, "thank you for never giving up, and thank you for helping Timmy walk." "Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth," Sarah replied, hugging the girl. When night fell and the guests had left, the new family gathered on the porch. "Daddy," Timmy said, sitting on Sarah's lap, "now that Mommy Sarah married you, are you going to give me a little brother?" David and Sarah exchanged glances, laughing. "First, let's get used to being an official family," David replied. "Then we'll talk about little brothers." "But I really want a brother to play with," the boy insisted. "Who says you'll only have one?" Jennifer teased. "Jennifer," Sarah protested, blushing. "What?" "Couples in love usually have lots of kids," her sister-in-law shot back, enjoying Sarah's flustered reaction. "Aunt Jennifer's right," Margaret agreed. "This house is big enough for plenty of children." David wrapped his arms around Sarah and Timmy. "Let's take it slow. First, let's enjoy being a family just as we are. Then we'll see what the future holds for us." "The future holds so much happiness," said Timmy, with the innocent wisdom of children. "Because now, we're a complete family." Sarah looked around, seeing the people she loved gathered on the porch of the house that was now truly her home. David by her side, strong and caring. Timmy in her lap, healthy and joyful. Jennifer smiling in her wheelchair, finally at peace with her family. Margaret organizing the leftover cake, happy to have a house full of life again. A year ago, she had been a broken woman with no prospects, working as a cleaner just to survive. Today, she was a wife, a mother, a respected physical therapist, and part of a family that loved her unconditionally. "Thank you," she whispered to the universe. "For what?" asked David. "For everything. For that day in the barn, for believing in me, for giving me a second chance." "The second chance was mine," he replied, kissing her forehead. "You taught me it's possible to start over, to love again, to be happy even after losing everything." "And you taught me that family isn't just about blood," Jennifer added. "It's about choosing to love people every day." "And you taught me it's never too late to change, to grow, to become a better person," Margaret finished. Timmy yawned in Sarah's lap. "Can I sleep here tonight, with both of you?" "Of course you can," Sarah answered. "Tonight and whenever you want." "Even when you give me a little brother?" David and Sarah laughed. "Especially when we give you a little brother," David said. "You'll have to teach him everything you've learned about being strong and brave." "I will," Timmy promised, closing his eyes. "I'll teach him how to walk, to run, to play in the barn, and to love," Sarah added softly. "And to love," the boy agreed, already half asleep. They stayed there on the porch late into the night, talking about plans for the future, about the rehab center that grew every month, about the trips they wanted to take together. When they finally went inside, David carried the sleeping Timmy to their bedroom. The boy slept between them that first official night as a family, one arm over David and the other over Sarah, as if making sure they wouldn't leave during the night. "He's still afraid," Sarah observed, stroking the boy's hair. "That's normal," David replied. "It'll take time for him to truly believe you're here to stay." "And you? Do you believe it yet?" David turned to look at her in the dark. "I believe you're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I believe we're a real family, and I believe we're going to be very happy together. I believe that too. You know what else I believe?" "What?" "That barn is a magical place. There you brought Timmy back to life. There we fell in love. There I asked you to marry me. I think it should stay exactly as it is. Like a monument to love. Like a reminder that miracles happen when we least expect them." Sarah smiled in the dark. "David? Yes? I love you. I love you. I love Timmy. I love Jennifer. I even love Margaret with all her stubbornness. And we love you, more than we can say." "Really? How much?" David thought for a moment. "Remember that first day when you were lying in the hay with Timmy on top of you, both of you laughing?" "I remember. That was the moment my heart started beating again. After 3 years of being still, it came back to life. So I love you enough that my heart was resurrected." Sarah stayed silent, moved by his words. "And you?" David asked. "How much do you love me? Remember the day you offered to help me get my license back when you said you believed in me?" "I remember. That was the day I started believing in myself again. After 2 years thinking I was incompetent, I found hope again. So I love you enough for bringing me back to myself." They fell asleep like that, with Timmy between them, their hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had led them there. 2 years later, Timmy finally got a little brother. Matthew was born healthy and became the center of attention for the family. Timmy, now 7 years old and walking perfectly, took his role as big brother seriously, teaching the baby all about the farm. The Rural Rehabilitation Center had become a reference in the region, helping dozens of children and offering not just physical therapy, but also psychological support for families. Jennifer had found love again. Dr. Anthony Matthews, the lawyer who had helped Sarah, had become a frequent visitor to the farm and developed a tender relationship with her. Margaret, at 68, discovered a calling for caring for babies and young children. She became the official grandma, not just to Timmy and Matthew, but to all the children who visited the center. One Sunday afternoon, 5 years after that first meeting in the barn, the whole family gathered on the porch. David held 2-year-old Matthew while watching Timmy play in the yard with perfect coordination. "Sometimes it feels like a dream," Sarah remarked. "If it is, I never want to wake up," David replied. "It's not a dream," Jennifer said. "It's just life being generous after being cruel for so long. And us deserving that generosity," Margaret added. "Daddy!" Timmy shouted from the yard. "Can I take Matthew to see the birds in the barn?" "You can, but be careful with him." "I'm always careful. He's my little brother." David and Sarah exchanged a smile. "Remember when you asked if I believed that barn was magical?" Sarah said. "I do. Now I'm sure it is. That's where you first saw me with Timmy, where we fell in love, where you proposed, and now our children play there every day." "Our children," David repeated, savoring the words. "I like how that sounds." "Me too. And you know what?" "What?" "We still have plenty of room in that barn for more playtime, more laughter, more kids." David looked at her in surprise. "Sarah Johnson, are you telling me what I think you're telling me?" "I'm saying that maybe, in a few months, Matthew and Timmy will get another little brother. Or sister." David nearly dropped Matthew from his lap. "Are you sure?" "I am. I took the test yesterday." "And you didn't tell me?" "I wanted to wait for the right moment. And the right moment is now, surrounded by our family, watching our children play, knowing we're completely happy." David kissed her passionately, making Matthew laugh and clap his hands. "Another baby!" the little boy shouted, as if he understood what was happening. "That's right, sweetheart," Sarah said, scooping him into her arms. Another baby for you and Timmy to take care of." Jennifer and Margaret, who had overheard the conversation, began crying with emotion. "This house will never be quiet," Jennifer remarked, laughing through her tears. "And thank goodness for that," Margaret replied. "A house with children's noise is a house full of life." Timmy came running back from the barn. "Dad, Mom, you have to see. There's a nest of baby birds in the barn. Tiny baby birds." "Baby birds," Sarah repeated, giving David a meaningful look. "Seems even the birds know this is a special place for babies to be born," he said, pulling his family into a hug. That night, after the children were asleep, David and Sarah walked to the barn to see the nest Timmy had discovered. 5 baby birds, David noted, peering carefully at the nest. 3 children, Sarah replied, resting a hand on her still flat stomach. 3 kids, he repeated, amazed. "When I first saw you here, I never imagined that 5 years later we'd be talking about our 3rd child. Life is full of surprises, the best kind." They sat on the hay, in the same spot where it all began. "David, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret it? Giving me a chance, believing in me, facing all those problems?" David looked at her, surprised. "Regret it? Sarah, are you serious?" "It's just, sometimes I think about how much simpler your life would be if you'd never hired me." "Simpler?" David laughed. "My life wouldn't be simple. It'd be empty, sad, pointless." He took her hands. "Sarah, before you came here, I was just surviving, taking care of the farm, taking care of Timmy, but I wasn't really living. You taught me how to live again. And you taught me that I was worth something, that I wasn't the incompetent physical therapist Dr. Richards said I was. You were always extraordinary. I just helped you remember that." They stayed there talking late into the night, making plans for the future, imagining what it would be like to have 3 kids running around Oak Ridge Farm. "A girl," Sarah said suddenly. "How do you know?" "Mother's intuition, it's a girl, and she'll be just like Jennifer, strong, determined, brave." "If she's like you, she'll already be perfect," David replied. "And if she's like you, she'll be kind and protective. If she's like Timmy, she'll be cheerful and affectionate. And if she's like Matthew, she'll be curious and mischievous." They laughed, imagining the personality of the child yet to come. "David?" "Yes?" "Thank you." "For what? You've thanked me 1,000 times. Not for giving me a job or fighting for my license or marrying me. Thank you for letting me love Timmy from the very first day. Thank you for loving him when even I couldn't show love properly. You always loved him. You were just lost in your own pain. And you helped me find my way back." When they returned home, they found Jennifer still awake in the living room, reading a book. "Have you told her yet?" she asked, nodding at Sarah's belly. "How did you know?" Sarah asked, surprised. "Brothers of pregnant women develop a sixth sense for these things," Jennifer joked. "Besides, you've got that telltale glow in your eyes." "What glow?" "The same one you had when you were pregnant with Matthew." David sat beside his sister. "Jennifer, are you happy here, really?" "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." "Why?" "Because in a few months there'll be another child in the house, and I know that means more noise, more work." "David Miller," Jennifer interrupted, "stop apologizing for being happy. Stop feeling guilty for having a big, loving family. You deserve this. Both of you deserve this." "Sometimes I still feel guilty for being so happy when there's so much suffering in the world." "That's exactly why you should be happy," Jennifer said wisely. "To prove that it's possible to overcome pain, to start over, to find joy after sorrow. You're an inspiration." "An inspiration." "David, how many families have visited the rehab center and left here with renewed hope? How many kids have gotten better seeing Timmy's example? How many parents have learned that limitations don't mean you can't be happy?" Sarah sat on Jennifer's other side. "She's right. Our happiness isn't selfish. It's proof that it's always possible to start again." "And now," Jennifer added, "you two should get some sleep because tomorrow's a big day. A farm to run, 2 kids to raise, a rehab center to manage, and a baby to announce." "Announce?" "Margaret will want to throw a party. The patients at the center will want to celebrate. Timmy will want to tell everyone he's going to be a big brother again. David and Sarah laughed, imagining the commotion the news would cause. "You're right," said David. "We'd better rest before the storm." "What a wonderful storm," Sarah added. The next morning, as they were having breakfast, Timmy noticed something different about his parents' behavior. "Daddy, Mommy, you're acting weird today." "Weird how?" asked David, trying to play it cool. "I don't know, just extra happy." Matthew, sitting in his high chair, clapped his hands without understanding what was going on. "Timmy," Sarah said, "there's something we want to tell you." "What?" "Remember how you always ask for a little brother for Matthew?" "Yes, every day." "Well," David paused dramatically, "your wish is coming true." Timmy stopped chewing. "What do you mean?" "Mommy's going to have a baby," David said softly. The boy looked at Sarah's belly, then at his parents, then at Matthew, then back at her belly. "A baby. A real baby?" "A real baby," Sarah confirmed. Timmy jumped from his chair and ran to hug her. "Thank you, Mommy. Thank you for giving me another little brother. Thank you for wanting one so much for Matthew. When will it be born?" "In a few months." "A few months?" Timmy looked disappointed. "That's so long." "Babies need time to grow in Mommy's belly," David explained, "like the birds in the barn." "Exactly like the birds in the barn." Margaret walked into the kitchen just then, carrying a basket of fresh eggs. "Why all the excitement?" she asked. "Grandma Margaret," Timmy shouted, "Mommy has a baby in her belly." Margaret nearly dropped the basket. "A baby? Sarah, my dear, is it true?" "It's true, Mrs. Margaret." The older woman began to cry with emotion, set the basket on the table, and hugged Sarah tightly. "Oh my, what joy, another child for this house." "Grandma, why are you crying?" Timmy asked, concerned. "I'm crying from happiness, sweetheart. Sometimes when we're very happy, we cry." "Then I'll cry too," the boy said, squeezing his eyes to force out tears. Everyone laughed at Timmy's attempt to cry from happiness. "No need to force it, son," David said. "Tears of joy come on their own when the time is right." Jennifer walked into the kitchen, drawn by the noise. "From the laughter, I'm guessing you've already shared the news." "Aunt Jennifer," Timmy ran to her. "Did you know Mommy has a baby in her belly?" "I had a hunch," she replied, winking at David and Sarah. "And are you happy?" "Very happy. Another child to spoil and teach mischief when their parents aren't looking." "Jennifer," Sarah protested, laughing. "What? Every aunt has the right to spoil her nieces and nephews a little." "It's true," Margaret agreed. "It's part of the job." Matthew, who had been quietly watching everything, suddenly slapped the table and shouted, "Baby, baby!" Everyone turned to him, surprised. "He gets it," Timmy said, amazed. "Matthew understands there's going to be a baby." "My baby?" Matthew asked, pointing to himself. "No, sweetheart," Sarah explained. "The baby will belong to all of us, your little brother or sister." "Sissy," Matthew repeated, clapping. "I think he wants a little sister," David observed. "I don't care," Timmy said. "I just want it to be born soon so we can play together." "Well, you'll have to wait patiently," Jennifer said. "And in the meantime, you can start learning how to help take care of the baby." "How? By learning to change diapers, give bottles, cuddle when it cries." "I already know how to do all that," protested Timmy. "I learned it from Matthew." "It's true," confirmed Margaret. "This boy is a natural-born big brother. And he'll be an even better big brother with the third baby," added Sarah. The rest of the day was one continuous celebration. Timmy insisted on sharing the news with all the farm workers, the neighbors who stopped by, and even the cows in the pasture. "The cows need to know there's going to be another child on the farm," he explained very seriously. In the afternoon, when the patients arrived for their physical therapy sessions, Timmy made sure to share the news too. "Sophie," he called out to the 9-year-old girl who had become one of the regular patients. "My mom's having another baby." "Really?" Sophie smiled. "That's so cool. Will it be a boy or a girl?" "We don't know yet, but I hope it's a girl so she can be your buddy." Sophie laughed. "You want a sister to play dolls with?" "No, I want a sister to teach how to play soccer and climb trees." "Timmy," Sarah interjected, Girls can like soccer and climbing trees too. That's true. Aunt Jennifer told me when she was little she climbed the tallest tree on the farm. And I'd still be climbing it if it weren't for the wheelchair, added Jennifer, who had walked over. Aunt Jennifer, do you miss walking? Sophie asked with the innocent curiosity of children. I do. But you know what I don't miss? What? Chasing after trouble. Now trouble has to come to me, and since I'm slower at running away, I have to solve it right the first time. The kids laughed at her explanation. Does that mean wheelchairs make you smarter? Another boy asked. No, Jennifer replied thoughtfully. It means sometimes limitations force us to find creative solutions, and that what matters most isn't how we move, but how we love. Sarah watched the conversation with admiration. Jennifer had become a source of inspiration not just for the children, but for the parents too. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, David found Sarah on the porch gazing at the stars. What are you thinking about? How much our lives have changed. 5 years ago, I was alone, desperate, thinking I'd never be happy again. Today you're surrounded by people who love you, expecting our third child, running a rehab center that helps dozens of families. It's surreal. David sat beside her. Sarah, can I tell you a secret? Of course. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm afraid this is all just a really long dream, that I'll wake up and find out you never existed, that I'm still the bitter, lonely man I was before. And when that happens, what do? I look at you sleeping beside me, listen to the boys breathing in the next room, and remember that real happiness comes with real responsibilities. Dreams don't have dirty diapers to change. Sarah laughed. That's a very practical way to look at happiness. It's an honest one. Dreams are perfect. Real life is beautiful, but it has challenges. And I'll take real challenges over perfect dreams any day. Even when Matthew wakes up 3 times a night? Especially when Matthew wakes up 3 times a night. Because it means he's real, he's here, he's ours. And when Timmy asks those impossible to answer questions? I love the impossible questions. They make me think, grow, see the world through his eyes. And when Margaret decides to reorganize the whole house without warning, that's her way of showing love. She takes care of our home like it's a temple. And when Jennifer gives unsolicited advice about raising kids, Jennifer's advice is always wise, even when we don't want to hear it. Sarah turned to look at him. David Miller, you've become an incorrigible optimist. I learned from you. You taught me there's always a good side to every situation, even the hardest ones. Even with Timmy's cerebral palsy, especially with Timmy's cerebral palsy, it brought us you. It taught us about strength, determination, and perseverance. It showed us that love is more powerful than any limitation. And what if the new baby has a limitation too? David thought for a moment before answering. Then we'll teach them the same thing we taught Timmy, that limitations don't define who we are, that with love, dedication, and support, any challenge can be overcome. What if it's a girl with cerebral palsy? We'll teach her she can be anything she wants to be, a doctor, an engineer, a mother, an artist. The possibilities are endless when you have a family who believes in you. Sarah placed her hand on her belly. I think our baby is listening to our conversation. How do you know? They're moving, like they're agreeing with what you said. David rested his hand over hers. Hello, baby. It's Daddy. I just want you to know you're already so loved. You have a brother who can't wait to meet you, another brother who'll teach you how to make a mess, an aunt who'll spoil you rotten, a grandma who'll care for you like you're a prince or princess, and parents who'll love you unconditionally forever. And there's a magical barn where you can play when you grow up, Sarah added, and little birds who'll teach you about nature, and a rehabilitation center where you'll learn everyone is special in their own way, and a whole farm to explore and have fun. But most importantly, Sarah said, you have a family who'll never give up on you no matter the challenges. They stayed on the porch late into the night, talking to the baby still forming inside her, making promises about the love and care they'd give. 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Emily Miller was born. She came into the world crying loudly, as if announcing her arrival to the whole farm. She was a healthy baby girl, with her mother's brown eyes and her father's dark hair. Timmy, now 8, was the first to meet his sister. "She's so tiny," he observed, peering through the nursery window. "You were just like that when you were born," David explained. "And will she grow up like I did? She'll grow up in her own way, at her own pace. But will she be able to walk and talk? We'll give her all the love and support so she can develop the best she can." Matthew, now 3, was fascinated by his baby sister. "My baby," he said, pointing at Emily. "Our baby," Timmy corrected. "She's all our sister." Emily's arrival brought even more joy to the farm. The rehabilitation center had to pause activities for 2 weeks so everyone could adjust to the new routine. "This house has never felt so alive," Margaret remarked, rocking Emily while Sarah rested. "And never been so loud," Jennifer added, watching Timmy and Matthew play in the yard. "The sound of happiness is music to my ears," Sarah replied. David watched everything from the bedroom window. 3 children, a wonderful wife, a sister who had come home, a housekeeper who was practically a second mother, a rehabilitation center helping dozens of families. 5 years ago, he'd been a broken man, trying to raise a child with special needs alone. Now he was whole, surrounded by love and purpose. "Thank you," he murmured, looking up at the sky. "Did you say something?" Sarah asked. "Just giving thanks." "Thanks to whom?" "To whoever put you in my path, to whoever gave me a second chance at happiness, to whoever blessed our family with so much love." Sarah smiled. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I don't think it was fate that put me in your path. It was love. The love you felt for Timmy even when you couldn't show it. The love that made you hire 17 different people until you found someone who truly cared for him. The love that made you believe in me when I didn't even believe in myself. So love brought you to us. Love brought us to each other. You needed someone to love your son. I needed someone to believe in my work. And in the middle of all that, we discovered we needed each other too." David moved closer to the bed and kissed Sarah's forehead. "I love you, Sarah Johnson. I love our family. I love our life. I love you too, and know this, no matter how many challenges lie ahead, we'll face them together. Always together. Always." Emily chose that moment to wake up and start crying. "I think someone's hungry," said Sarah, preparing to nurse. "Or maybe she just wants to join the conversation," David teased. "Perhaps she takes after the family. Everyone here loves to share their opinion." They laughed, and David sat in the chair beside the bed to watch Sarah nurse Emily. "David?" "Yes?" "Do you still think the barn is a magical place?" "More than ever. Why?" "Because last night I dreamed of taking Emily there when she's older, and in the dream she played just like Timmy did when we first met." "How did you feel in the dream?" "Complete, fulfilled, as if everything in life had fallen perfectly into place." "It wasn't a dream," David said softly. "It was a glimpse of the future, because everything really has fallen perfectly into place." Emily stopped nursing and looked up at her father with her attentive brown eyes. "Hi, Princess," he said, gently touching her tiny hand. "Welcome to our crazy, wonderful family." The baby curled her little fingers around her father's as if sealing an agreement. "I think she approves of the family," Sarah observed. "How could she not? She has 2 brothers who already adore her, an aunt who'll teach her mischief, a grandma who'll spoil her rotten, and parents who'd do anything to see her happy. And a magical barn where she can play when she grows up. And little birds that return every year to build new nests. And a rehab center where she'll learn that being different is being special. And an entire farm to call home." Emily yawned and closed her eyes, as if satisfied with all the promises she'd heard. "I think she likes the plan," said Sarah. "How could she not? It's a perfect plan." That afternoon, while Emily slept and Matthew dozed, Timmy asked to go to the barn with his parents. "I want to show you something," he said mysteriously. In the barn, Timmy led them to the spot where he discovered the bird's nest months earlier. "Look," he said, pointing upward. David and Sarah looked up and saw not 1, but 3 different nests in the ceiling beams. "3 nests," David noted. "Just like 3 kids," Timmy said proudly. It's true, Sarah agreed. This really is a magical place. And you know what else? Timmy continued. One of the nests has 3 baby birds, just like us 3. David and Sarah exchanged a smile. What do you think that means? David asked. I think it means this is truly our home, ours and the birds, and that we'll all grow up together, happy and safe. I agree, said Sarah. This is definitely our home. Forever? Forever, David promised. Just then, as if to confirm the promise, they heard Emily's cry from the house. Emily's awake, Timmy said. Come on, she must want to meet the birds. They walked out of the barn hand in hand, heading toward the house where Matthew was waking up from his nap. Jennifer was preparing the afternoon snack. Margaret was humming as she folded laundry, and Emily was crying to let everyone know she was ready for another family moment. It was a perfect afternoon in an imperfect but real life, full of love. And in the barn, the little birds kept singing, as if they too knew this was a house where miracles happened every day. The end of the story. Now tell us, what did you think of this story of perseverance and love? Do you believe Sarah made the right choices in trusting David and fighting for his innocence? And David, do you think he was brave for risking everything for the woman he loved? Share your honest thoughts in the comments and let us know where you're following us from. If this story touched your heart as deeply as it touched ours, don't forget to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories we've prepared especially for you.